Welcome to Inside New York's Art World. I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein, and our guest tonight is a celebrated painter of what she prefers to call pictures of people. She is widely celebrated as well for her work other than portraits, still lifes, landscapes, and seascapes as well. I guess you're best known for your soul-bearing exposés, and you say that your greatest strength as a painter is in your psychological acumen. What do you mean when you say that, Alice Neel?
Well, if I had been a psychiatrist, I would be wealthy. As it is, in the process of painting someone, I reveal not only what shows, but what doesn't show, but what is also characteristic. I don't know if any of you see my show at the Whitney in '74? I had the whole second floor. That's good. You get a gold star.
In an article in an art magazine, in fact, Art News, in 1977, various distinguished curators were asked whom they considered to be the most underrated American painters.
Yes.
And Anne Sutherland Harris, a distinguished educator and art historian, says that Alice Neel is the most underrated American painter.
Well,
one of the reasons that she gave was that she felt that people are afraid of your bold images of humanity. Is that fair, and is that an accurate description?
Well, she is the chairman of academic affairs at the Metropolitan Museum, and I also gave a slide lecture there. I showed 167 slides there last spring. What she actually said was that I was the best portrait painter of the 20th century, which may not be untrue, because actually portraits are where more crimes are committed than in any other form of art. I mean, witness the college professors that hang on walls in petrified form. I think they're frightful. Or go to the Harvard Club for dinner, and you'll see a lot of stuffed creatures, but they're not Dwayne Hanson, you know, they're portraits of distinguished people. But I break those rules. They're considered bold by timid people. They're not really bold. They're just the truth, you know. And actually, my work was not really, it began to be understood in the late 50s. Before that, it was too tough for everybody.
Why don't we go back a ways? You just said you were going to have an exhibition of 50 years of drawings. Here you were, born in a small town in Pennsylvania, the granddaughter of a Civil War veteran. On one side of your family. Yes, that's right,
both sides.
And on the other side of your family, a signatory of the Declaration of Independence.
That's right, that's right.
How did Alice Neel, from that bourgeois beginning, become such a maverick?
Well, to begin with, I was born in Gladwin, but then I was taken to a small town. I don't know, I just always wanted to be an artist. Now, my father's family had been opera singers, and that's connected with the arts, you know. But he wasn't. In fact, he was anti-Bohemian. But anyway, Bohemianism and art, the only thing Bohemianism does, it takes that awful stiff coat off of things. At its best, at its worst, Bohemianism is bad because you die in the gutter or something of the sort. But at its best, Bohemianism is maybe good because it's a liberating sort of thing. Although I don't know if there are any left today.
Well, you chose what was then considered a life of Bohemianism and chose to study at the Philadelphia College of Arts.
No, Philadelphia School of Design for Women.
Now
that was not Bohemian.
Not at all. That's my question. Why did you choose such a cloistered kind of
Well,
education?
I'll tell you why. Because, for one thing, unfortunately, I wasn't lesbian. Although if you're a woman's lib today, it's very fashionable to be lesbian. I'm almost ashamed of not being lesbian. But I don't think my sons would like it. But I was just up at, where was I? Milwaukee. And Adrienne Rich read from her poetry there. She has 3 sons, but she said she didn't care if I said, are they homosexuals? She said, I don't care because I'm a lesbian, so since I take the right to be lesbian, I give them the right to be homosexuals. But I told her I just never wanted my son to belong, either of them to belong to a little group in society, because I think it's harder to live like that. Now, it may not be with the mayor that we have. I don't presume he's here. Is Mayor Koch here?
Not as far as I know. But what is interesting is, in terms of your own rebellious youth and life, and your biography is filled with descriptions of your own personal life. And perhaps it would be of interest to the audience to know really just how much of a rebellious youth you did have.
I didn't. I was not rebellious ever at home. I went to the Philadelphia School of Design, and by the time I went there, although I had some literature once that said it was once a school for poor working girls, but by the time I got there, it was like a school where rich girls went before they got married.
And that's what you did.
Well, but I didn't do it for that reason. I did it to learn about art. And they taught a perfectly conventional art course, which I am not against even today, where you first drew from plaster cast. Only they had a wonderful collection of plaster casts. They must have just thrown them all in the garbage heap. But I was in England in '65, and I saw the Victoria Albert Museum, where they had just bought wonderful Italian facsimiles of their great art, and they were not nearly as good as the ones that the Philadelphia School of Design had. They had Moses, they had those wonderful bas-reliefs from the Parthenon. They had wonderful things there. What they did with them, I don't know. But after first you studied that, then you went into the life class, you worked hard, and I worked hard there for 4 years.
And then you left there, and you left the country as well.
Well, no, I met in Chester Springs in the last summer I was there. I met a Cuban who was also an artist. And when I left the school, I married him and went to Cuba, yes.
Was that where your first exhibition took place?
Yes, but I can't remember the name of the gallery.
So I've noticed, but you do remember the content of the exhibition.
Well, I have, when I give this slide lecture, I have several slides that I did in Havana in 1926. Because the road that I pursued, and the road that I think keeps you an artist, was that no matter what happened to me, you still keep on painting. You know, women get pregnant and they give up painting for 3 or 4 years. They never go back to it. It's finished. But you just should keep on painting no matter how difficult it is. Because this is all part of experience. And the more experience you can have, the better it is, unless it kills you, and then you know you've gone too far.
The themes of your first marriage seem to have evolved through the 50 years of your career since then.
The what?
Some of the themes of your first marriage and your own personal
Well, they
tragic
weren't basically,
circumstance.
they had nothing to do with that marriage. They were my themes. They were, I did a mother and child then, and I did a couple of beggars. In fact, one of the first shows that I show in a slide lecture is 2 beggars in Havana, and it's one of the reasons for Castro in Cuba, because when I went there at 26, there were people who were hugely wealthy and the bitterly poor, much poorer than I'd ever seen, and even wealthier.
The theme of mother and child seems to preoccupy you throughout all of these years, even manifest in several
Well, this is Linda
reproductions.
Nochlin, that famous, she put on 400 years of women's art. You know, I had that TB in Harlem in that, and in fact, the lady who purchased that, Billie Holiday, is sitting back there.
Why And how do you explain your preoccupation?
There's no preoccupation, it's just natural. I mean, the usual fate of women, or a common fate, it used to be more common because now you can get abortions, but women had children, and that was it. Mother and child. Look, it goes back far, it's traditional. Think of the Virgin Mary, she's the first.
Well, what are some of the forces and events that influenced your vision?
Nothing except living and growing up and thinking and seeing the world.
You saw a lot of that world right here in New York City, in fact.
Well, yes. After I left Havana, I came to New York and I was on the WPA project. And then I did innumerable street scenes. And I've done some street scenes lately. But then I did mostly street scenes.
Well, from the time that you returned to New York till you were part of the WPA project, you had a rather colorful existence.
Very colorful, but nothing like today. I just went to Milwaukee, and I met a very nice young couple there, and I said, "Are you married?" They said, "Oh no, we're roommates at the college." They were just living together at the college, and that was considered perfectly all right. But not, in my day, that was shocking. And that never to me was shocking. Do you know what Napoleon did when the Pope went to put a crown on him? He took the crown away from him and put it on himself. You don't have to wait.
And you didn't?
I didn't, because I was married once and I found out all about marriage. And another thing, it's very expensive, divorces and remarrying and all that. And also it seemed to me I didn't have time for that, really.
But throughout your portraits, there are a number of men that appear that are referred to in interesting adjectives. There is an intellectual sailor, the Harvard man.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, I wish
the
this
Puerto
was a slide
Rican
lecture.
nightclub singer.
Do you know
the intellectual filmmaker.
That's true. They all were that. The slide lecture, I just put their image on and then I tell these stories, but I guess I can tell them without the image.
I think so, and we will.
With you to inspire me.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about that period in your life?
Well, let me see. I had a terrible nervous breakdown after the Cuban life broke up. And then I went out to Stockton, and there was a sailor out there who I eventually lived with in New York, who was very jealous and possessive by nature, and who finally, he was also a very early drug addict. I can't say too much about him because the Irish have a saying, you can't speak evil of the dead, and he died last year. And also, he went to Spain in the Abraham Lincoln Battalion, and I considered that sort of heroic, but he did cut and burn up all of my work.
Why did he do that?
He got jealous. He got jealous. You know how men are. They get jealous. They're possessive.
This was because of the Harvard man.
Yes, this was Harvard man, but I must tell you the truth that I didn't really care much about either of them. I was still more or less in love with the Cuban.
But your friendship with the Harvard man persisted over a 40-ish year
Well,
period.
he pursued me all his life. You know what it was? It was very strange. Oh, I wish I had my slides here. I showed 3 phases of him.
And you have painted him in 3 phases.
He liked aspiration more than realization because he chased me madly all of his life. And when he finally moved into my apartment in 1975, when then the whole thing had become a friendship, he very soon bored with the whole thing. So I realized it was just the fun of the chase. And he really became a nuisance to me.
This is after 40 years.
Yes, isn't that amazing? But I didn't do anything particularly to keep up his interest in me. Now, one of the fascinations of him in the 30s was that everybody was starving, and he used to take me to Longchamps and the Harvard Club, and they have very good meals, you know.
How did you ever move to Spanish Harlem? How did that come about? Because in your life with
then
Kenneth, you were in Cornelia
after the sailor, I
Street.
had another so-called lover who was Puerto Rican. And since my oldest son isn't here, I can tell you that he's his father, because my children are very respectable.
We're going to talk about that in a moment. First, I'd like to go through your life and then the kind of life that you wanted for
I
your
loved
children.
Harlem because it was full of wonderful material. And I also was very concerned with the life that the third world people in this country had. So I really now have a whole body of work about Harlem. And one of those pictures, which Billie Holiday back there purchased for her collection, was out at the Los Angeles County Museum in that 400 years of women's art. And what amazed me was that all the women critics, you see, you're very respected if you paint your own pussy as a woman's liver. But they didn't have any respect for being able to politically see an abused third world. So nobody mentioned that I managed to even see beyond my pussy politically. But I thought that that was really a good thing if they'd had a little more brain. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Is that going too far?
You may say anything that you like.
All right, I thought they should have given me credit for being able to see not only just the feminine world, but my own world. Now, as far as being feminine is concerned, when I was on the project, there was a chap there, I don't know what he was, Spanish or something. He said, "Oh, Alice Neel, the woman that paints like a man." So I said to him, "No, I don't paint like a man. The only thing is I don't paint China." But you can't insult that now, because that's considered very avant-garde to paint China, because women did that. And I have nothing against painting China.
She means the porcelain versus
Yes.
the country.
Yes. Oh, I don't mean, you mean the country?
No, the porcelain.
Oh, no, I don't mean the country.
Nothing racist.
No, I don't like the way China's behaving anyway now.
We're going to get to politics in a moment. Let's
All
go
right.
through. I think we were just about
Living
to
in
move
Harlem.
to Spanish Harlem.
Oh, well, I liked it very much there. I got a huge apartment. It was a very wide railroad apartment. It had about 12 windows. And I decorated it myself. It was very interesting, and the rent was low. And I had plenty of space, because to be a painter, one of the most important things is space. You know, you have to have room to paint, you have to have room to store things. Also, I was surrounded by the people of Harlem that I found very interesting. And Milwaukee's a very advanced city, because when I gave my slide lecture there, every time I showed a black or a Puerto Rican or somebody who wasn't a WASP, they applauded. And I thought, that's remarkable. I never had an audience do that before.
What do you think that means?
It must mean that the Middle West is getting smart.
Or maybe it was that audience.
No, I don't think just an audience exists. After all, an audience exists somewhere. And these happen to be in Milwaukee. They were at Alverno, that nuns' college. Adrienne Rich spoke to them in the afternoon, and she told all these young girls of 20 that the thing to be was lesbians. And I thought that was wrong, because one girl said, "What about my future?" And I thought that was pathetic, but she gave her no hope whatever.
But you have remained in that part of New York City for...
No, I'm not there now.
You're not on...
I'm not in Harlem now.
But just below.
No, I'm not in Harlem. I'm now on the west side, where I still get held up in the elevator, and my Sony televisions get stolen. But I'm really in a very beautiful apartment, about 100 years old, also huge, on the corner of 107th and West End. I moved away from the Harlem apartment in '62, but only because some aspiring landlords bought the building and put everyone out, and then divided it in half and charged double the rent. And they just had to get everyone out, you know. I was the last one to go, but they got me out by letting all the bums from the corner come in, and they set fires in the building every night. And I could see all my work and myself burning up, so I moved to the west side.
You raise a very significant point about your work. For years, you lived and you live surrounded by your own work.
Yes, I still do.
Is it because, well, obviously at an earlier point in time, your paintings were not considered as aesthetically by some quarters as significant as they are now? Or is it also the case in the instance of some of your sitters that it is a rather difficult thing to live with your perception of their
Well, if they're
existence?
backward people, they don't like it. But I'm not going to let, you see, one reason I even got the show at the Whitney was because I dared to be experimental in painting people. You see, all during the 40s and 50s, New York was nothing but abstract expressionists. Nobody painted people or anything like that. It was just abstract expressionism. And they wouldn't let people painters even get a foot in the door. So, but during that time, I couldn't give up what I was interested in for what was the fashion. So I kept right on painting. So I have this whole body of work. And I reached the conclusion, since I wasn't very aggressive and I wasn't a very good salesperson, I reached the conclusion that if I painted a good painting, that was sufficient. And in a way, the Whitney justified me, because they took about 15 pictures that had never been off a shelf and hung them in the Whitney in 1974, and also out on the Parkway for the 1976 bicentennial. I had two paintings, one that I did in 70, let me think, when was it? About 70, of the Gruen family. It was a very sophisticated painting. It had hung in a biannual at the Whitney in 72. And the other was a picture that I did in 1950 of a black Spanish family. It had never been off the shelf, but they put them both out on the Parkway. That's the Philadelphia Museum. And it was a very good show. Even Mary Cassatt was in it, you know. And it lasted for the whole duration of the bicentennial. However, if they had been bad paintings, they'd still be on the show.
What sustained you during all of those years?
What?
What sustained you during all of those years, both professionally and economically?
What is it? What?
Sustained you during all of those
a
years?
belief in art. I love art. I love painting itself. And also I had something very definite to say.
How would you describe that idea?
Well, let me think. When I painted James Farmer in '64. He was then marching in Mississippi, I think it was. And I had a painting of two black children from the Spanish Harlem era. And he just loved that. He thought that was wonderful. Now, when I give the slide lecture, I show first that. And then I show a little girl in Copenhagen. I went to Denmark in 1969. And she's a little Swedish girl, very beautiful, very spoiled, looking very different from the two little black girls. But I like the contrast of that. It shows a different fate, although maybe things are catching up a bit. Do you think they are? I mean, Andrew Young does something, I guess. Although I don't really trust Carter, but I better not say that on TV.
Actually, in 1972, you made a trip to East Africa.
Yes.
You've had a lifelong interest in problems of race.
Yes.
In fact, you've said that you like blacks better than you like whites.
Well, no. When I lived in Harlem, I came to see that these Puerto Rican faces were just wonderful. But I don't like blacks better than whites. What I don't think is right is to cross out a group of people or to make them forever on the defensive as they were made. When I lived in Harlem, there were no Spanish teachers in the schools. These children had to go to a school that knew nothing about their native culture, nor their native language, nor anything. And I, of course, I never thought that was fair.
One of your sitters, Dorothy Pearlstein, says that your paintings are a document of New York City, the lost souls of street people, and what she still referred to as the bohemian existence. Do you see them as history as well?
Yes, I see art itself as history. I think that's one of the functions of art, although now everything is so insecure, and we live now really, what is it they call it, the throwaway society? I don't think things are nearly as secure as we once thought they were, and in fact I just heard on the radio that Carter is making components of the neutron bomb. Now, of course, that doesn't destroy property, but it destroys people. But I don't believe things like that should be done. I think that makes us even more insecure. And I think the reason for all this insecurity is because the bomb still hangs over us. Don't you think it does, or does it?
I suspect you're quite right, but I think it's only one element of a world that is obviously in confusion.
Yes, well, the confusion. Now, the confusion comes from another source, too, and that is complete communication between the whole world. You know, although I hear the Arabs are going downhill a bit financially, although they've been buying buildings here, you know.
You've said that you paint and you like to make people happy. But during the course, with your paintings, during the course of these many years that you've been painting, you've painted the mad, the miserable, the neurotic, the isolated.
A cross-section.
Is that a cross-section?
Of course. If you read the statistics, you'd know that it was.
Is that a rather accurate description of the human condition as you see it?
Well, if you read the statistics about the number of mental institutions and the whole problem they have with hospitals and everything else, you'd realize that everything is not the beautiful people. Now, you mustn't leave out the fact, though, that after I moved to the West Side, I did a lot of very sophisticated people. Andy Warhol is owned by the Whitney. Also, John Perrault, a nude of John Perrault, who at the time I painted him was the art critic of the Village Voice, and also the Sawyer brothers, who are two very respectable painters. Also, I'm in Arts and Letters, the Academy of Arts and Letters.
When did you begin to have as your domain the celebrities of the art world? Isn't that a shift in your own emphasis?
No, because I always did everybody. Even the oldest ones, everyone is there. I never made that line. It's just that I found these people and their fate very interesting.
How have you managed to seduce so many people to unclothe themselves?
Oh, you mean nudes? Mm-hmm. Well, the greatest one was Cindy Nemser, that little art critic. She and her husband, who was a floor covering salesman, they came to pose for me. They were the two editors of a feminist art journal, but they looked awful. She looked frightful. She looked like Betty Boop or something. And he was all dressed up as a successful floor salesman, but he looked horrible. So gradually I got them to take one thing after another, and finally they had nothing on.
What's your technique, Alice Neel?
Oh, well now, do you want to give it to a salesman's class? I don't perfect that technique. I just do it. I told them when they had all those clothes on that I just didn't find anything interesting. And then the more they took off, the more interested I was. And finally, I found out that she, even though she has a face like a little lynx, she has a wonderful body. She's a dimpled darling, you know. And also, they're not lesbians. They're very fond of each other, and he does everything for her. And in fact, he has, in that picture, why don't you show it? You have it right there in the front of that catalog, that orange catalog. I could have brought, oh no, I couldn't. It's out in Artemisia. It's right in the front. In fact, the essay in the front of this is about how I got them to undress. She makes it very cute.
You've described yourself frequently as a collector of souls.
Well, do you know where that comes from?
Yes.
Did you read Gogol?
Yes.
Oh, thank God, you're cultured. No, almost nobody has read Gogol.
Alice Neel has likened herself to Chichikov
Yes,
in
that's
Gogol's
right.
Dead Souls.
That's right.
And she says that she is a collector of souls, but I think you're a collector of bodies, too.
Well, the soul usually lives somewhere. Unless you believe in disembodied souls up in the clouds. Now, there may be a few, but most of the souls we meet are clothed in flesh, aren't they?
I don't know what you mean.
Most of the souls one meets are covered with flesh.
If that is what one believes.
No, they live in flesh. Oh, I think your soul can take a little flight, but you know, it starts and ends in your body, doesn't it?
You say that you're interested in painting the zeitgeist and the Angst. And the Angst.
Yes, that's right, I am.
Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Well, in German, that means the spirit of the age, the zeitgeist, and the angst is the anxiety. I think that we are a very anxious people. Well, all you have to do is read all the people that die of heart attacks quite young to realize that there's a terrible pressure on people. And it gets worse, I think, all the time. The pressures multiply. Also, you can read articles about the intake now is so great that they don't think the brain is quite big enough to take it all in anymore. And of course, the brain is not going to get larger. So I think we're under considerable pressure.
You mentioned earlier your children.
But listen, first I'd like to tell you, what did I want to tell you? Oh, when I did that first thing about Chichikov, that was, did you ever see Pull My Daisy, that beat film?
I have, and I'd like you to tell this group how you came to be a part of that film.
Well, do you know who was in it?
Jack
Allen
Kerouac.
Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, he's dead now, God rest his soul, Gregory Corso, Larry River, me. They picked me out because I looked so respectable. They thought I looked typical, respectable American.
But you do.
I know I do. It's helped. No, it hasn't helped. I don't like it, but there's nothing I can do about it. And I can't dress like a Nevelson because I'm not. Where is she from in Russia, I wonder?
Kiev.
Kiev. Well, she brought those habits from Kiev.
Actually, you have sort of a Nevelson-esque kind of dress on.
No.
A more muted, perhaps, Pennsylvania version of it.
No, I don't think so. No. I am not a muted Pennsylvania version of Nevelson. No.
Do you ever liken your careers? You are of similar ages. You both have endured a great deal. Neither of your work was really discovered till you were in your 60s.
I knew her in 35 when she lived in an unheated
admirer of yours.
Yes. And
tell us about the shelves in your apartment.
I admire her too, yes.
Do you ever liken the development and the coincidence of your careers?
No, because I never knew her that well. I was never as brave as she was. I was a scare cat.
What do you mean?
I was really a scare cat. Even though all these things happened to me, I wasn't like Louise. Louise was afraid of nothing. I have the greatest admiration for Louise.
You've said that it wasn't until the 60s that you really flowered because it was only then that you could defend yourself. Is that what you mean?
Well, I tell you what, that isn't true of the art, because even when I had the Whitney show, they went back to the 30s. I always painted the same, but if I would go to a lecture and the lecturer would say something that I disagreed with completely, I wouldn't have the courage to raise my hand. I was too shy, but I got over that.
And how did you?
Oh, I was psychoanalysis, the usual way.
And it was in the 60s and in your 60s that life, at least apparently, begins to brighten for you.
Yes. In the 70s, I made all the pictures that are hanging at the Whitney. Well, the Museum of Modern Art has one that I did in the 60s. And this lady, Billie Holiday, has one that I did in the 40s. Now, also the, what is that museum in Ohio?
Part of Ohio.
Well, I don't know. That Copland's is the director of it. It's a big museum in Ohio. They just bought Jackie Curtis and Rita Red. Well, that was done in the 70s too. You see, Andy Warhol posed for me, and then after he posed, he sent me Jackie Curtis and Rita Red.
Transvestite.
She's a wonderful transvestite. And
who you took to the Harvard Club.
Oh, I took them
Why
there.
didn't you tell them what happened when you took them to the Harvard Club?
They came in looking absolutely disgraceful. They called me up the day before and they said, now you're going to paint us tomorrow. Wouldn't you like to see us first? And I was having dinner that night with this same Harvard man. And I said, I'm having dinner at 7, but why don't you come at 6 and we'll have a drink there? And they came in looking utterly outlandish, frightful. And that was when the Harvard Club was segregated. It's now desegregated. Oh, I have another funny story. Can I tell that too? Anyway, I took them up in the women's section, and finally a man in a tuxedo came and threw us out because he said, gentlemen have to wear jackets. But how he knew Jackie Curtis was a gentleman, I don't know. Because she looked like a beautiful, fascinating redhead, you know.
Well, not only does your career brighten in the 60s, it appears to me, so does your palette. Have your colors become more vibrant?
Well, this is, after all, an Olympics poster.
But
this
throughout a number of other works, I'm merely using this.
Well, that happened, though, even before I left Harlem. I don't even know why that happened. That just happened in the course of events that my palette brightened. And I was delighted to read Voltaire, Candide. I wish I had read it much earlier, because he showed how you could be pessimistic without being dreary about it. But I approached pessimism in an innocent fashion, and I thought if you were pessimistic, you had to also be rather heavy and dreary. But Candide is anything but dreary, and yet you can't find anything more pessimistic than that. But someone said it's because he had such a luxurious background. He was the one, though, that said the rich and the poor both have the right to sleep under bridges. I think that's a beautiful saying.
But of course, he had a character, too, that represented the ultimate triumph of hope over reality.
Of what? Hope.
Yes.
He may have, but he wrote a book. Well, did you read Candide ever?
I think so.
It's very pessimistic. It couldn't be more pessimistic, but it's done in a happy mood.
Let's come to your sons for a moment. After the kind of less than patterned existence that you endured, you made your way and earned your living on the WPA for $27 a week.
No,
for
$28.66.
Sorry. And for that, you had to present, was it a canvas every 6 weeks?
Every 6 weeks, I would present a 24 by 30 canvas. They were mostly street scenes, and I bought quite a number of them back because when the war came in and displaced the WPA, these pictures were sold as oil canvas to wrap pipes with. Now, I later sold some of them for very good prices, so this was an outlandish thing for the government to do, but that's what they did. By the way, Harold Rosenberg got on the WPA with 2 of my paintings. Don't leave that out of my history.
Well,
although if he were living, God rest his soul, he would hate me for saying that, especially publicly.
you have said that there was a well-known critic who used your paintings as his for the easel project. About whom were you referring?
Well, Harold Rosenberg, he borrowed them to get on the easel project, and then immediately he became a critic. But he was a very good friend of mine before the WPA, in the very early 30s in Greenwich Village. I knew him and I knew May, I knew the whole family.
Well, perhaps there was a confusion in what the use of those paintings.
What confusion? He took them to the WPA and got on it. That's not confused. That's very direct.
But he didn't represent them as his own work.
Yes, he said they were his, of course. How else would he have gotten on?
Well, I've never thought of him as a painter, but as a distinguished critic.
But look, dear, I'm only telling you history. He got on the art project as a painter and immediately became a critic. And I think he's a very fine critic. In fact, the year they took me into the Academy of Arts and Letters, they never took him in there, but they gave him an award that year, 76. He got an award for some of his famous articles in, what is it?
The New Yorker.
New Yorker, yes. They were very interesting.
I still want to come back to your sons because it's interesting to me. You said that in order to sustain a life as an artist, you have to, was it work like the devil?
You have to be two things. You have to be hypersensitive and you have to have a will of iron, because you have to decide never to let anything make you give it up. The fatal thing is to give it up. Because art, besides being a great pleasure and very stimulating, it's also hard and difficult. It's even hard physically. And once you give it up, you fall into the lazy way of not doing it, and you're finished.
Do you think this art is created out of some psychic despair?
No, I wouldn't damn it to that. I wouldn't say, after all, I like Mendelssohn very much, and he was, I think he was fairly wealthy, although I don't like him maybe as well as Schubert, who was poor, but I don't think that's the factor. I think you're just creative or you're not creative. And I don't think any school makes you creative either.
Why did you have such, in a sense, respectable and bourgeois aspirations for the careers of your two fine
I didn't,
sons?
they had. But I don't believe you should dictate to your children what they should do. You see, I was also very clever. I got them into a good private school, the Rudolf Steiner School, so they didn't have to grow up in these rather wretched environs, although I never found Harlem all that wretched. And when I first moved there were no bums on the corner, but as time went on, they did have bums on the corner. In fact, there was a film made up in Harlem, Weekend, I think it was, where they used the corner of the street where we
Well, the
lived.
point is, one son is a doctor and the other son is a lawyer.
Yes, they are, and but they're very nice, and they love me, and we're friends. So don't tell them if I say anything indiscreet.
You've said it actually in print.
Oh, really?
Tiny bit, yeah.
Not completely, though.
I hope not.
No, I don't spell it out. Anyway, the more famous I get, the more tolerant they become.
I bet.
Yeah, one is a doctor in Vermont, and the other one is a lawyer for Pan Am.
You've talked about yourself as a painter of people. In fact, you used before the reference people painter. Why do you object to being called a portraitist, and what does that mean to you?
Well, I tell you, the only reason is because I'm just like everybody else. I get conditioning. And the portrait was considered such a low form of art for so long that I was tainted with that, just like they say if you watch enough, you know how television conditions your mind and just takes you over. You know, in a few years maybe we'll all be rabbits. We won't be able to think at all. Well, that's the same thing happened to me, because I said to Jack Bauer, who was the director of the Whitney when I had the show in '74, and who said something about my portraits, and I said, oh, I hate that word. He said, don't worry, Alice, you're going to change all that, because he thought my portraits struck a revolutionary note in portraiture.
How do you feel about other portraitists who think they've struck a revolutionary note? I'm referring to the superrealists and the hyperrealists. What do you think of that work?
You mean the new realists?
Yes.
Well, the new realists, you see, emotion, although it may be coming back a bit now, emotion, but for about 10 years, oh, less than that, about 7 or 8 years, emotion has been considered very bad taste. The new realists equated a chair and a person and a table and some fruit. They're all the same thing. Now, while structurally they're all the same thing, actually I think a human being is somewhat different.
The factual nature?
No, not fact. It has nothing to do with fact. It's just that there's a living quality to human beings that I don't find in tables and chairs. Now, I may be even more backward now, because, you know, now they're doing mostly floors, aren't they? Don't you know those bricks that they bought in England, even though they were so poor?
Some critics claim that your incisive and sometimes biting eye is growing gentler with time and success.
Well, I think Tom Hess said that
He did.
in the New Yorker.
He spoke
He's
of
dead
it.
now, only
Yes.
58. Isn't that frightful?
Yes, it is.
I hate not having the Times because I can't read the obituaries. Because that's where I was up in Vermont when I read about Tom Hess and Rosenberg right next to each other. That was such a shock, you know.
It was to everyone.
Yeah, because they both had been friends. Tom gave me my first great article in Art News in '62.
And it was in, I believe, 1976 that he said that your most recent paintings had the Indian summer glow of success.
Well, that's fine. I'm glad. I hope that I do have it. Wouldn't it be nice to relax a few years?
I think so.
Although, well, now I don't know what to say. The show I'm going to have has nothing to do with that. But if I keep on living, and even if I don't, I'll have another show soon that you can see. I had a huge show down in Georgia. That's what that catalog came out of. I had 83 pictures. You see, I like not only the way the person looks actually, but also the sense, the feeling that the person gives off.
You've taken, actually, some great pride in your own militant feminism. Is that accurate?
I believe in feminism. I was born believing in it. My mother used to say, I don't know what you expect to do in the world. You're only a girl. But if anything, that made me more anxious to do something.
On a personal note, in looking in at the reproductions in that catalog, there are two rather elegant, sophisticated women that are very striking. Both of them, at least to this viewer's eyes, have a rather not totally approving visage.
Who?
One of them is your mother, and the other one is the portrait of Isabel Bishop, a very ladylike.
Oh, no, they don't disapprove of me. Isabel Bishop loves my work.
Oh, I know.
And in fact, you know who bought that? The Montclair Museum in Jersey. I am not unrespectable.
Oh,
I just
hardly.
do as I please. But I don't, for instance, I don't go out and break rules just for the fun of it.
But you do feel great commitment to certain ideals, and I'm thinking
Yes.
of the two times that you picketed, once at the Whitney Museum.
That's right, yes.
And once I
that
believe
was
it-
for blacks.
Do you want to tell the story about, was it Doty?
The Museum of Modern Art,
was
too.
your second picketing. Let's talk about the first
Oh,
one.
how do you know all this? You're wonderful. She's a medium. Yeah, I picketed the Whitney because they were being unfair to blacks. But the funny thing is, with all these handsome blacks in the line, that they should make a photograph of me. And the funny thing is, the way it scared the Whitney, these pickets, because I went in to use a ladies' room, and they were terrified, you know. They were absolutely terrified of the pickets. Yet what can pickets do? Nothing. Oh, and I have a funnier story to tell. I can't walk in demonstrations anymore, but about 4 or 5, before the Harvard Club desegregated, it used to be that women couldn't go in the men's oak room, the nicest place. They had to go upstairs. It was all decorated with chintz. And the food wasn't as good either. But then one day I picketed with this big Women's Lib march that went down Fifth Avenue. It must have been 6 or 7 years ago. And we went across 44th Street. So I knew all the waiters in the Harvard Club. They were all Latin Americans. And since I speak Spanish, I used to speak to them in their own language, you know. So they came out and begged me not to wreck the Whitney front office. I had no intention, nobody had any intention of wrecking the Whitney front office, but I thought I'll take advantage of it, so I said, but you tell them they better desegregate soon or we will wreck it. Anyway, they desegregated very soon after that.
Why did you picket the Museum of Modern Art?
Why? Because I felt that Rockefeller had a great responsibility in, I think, those 47 deaths at Attica. You see, he did the same thing that his father did, his grandfather did in 1921. In 1921 was the Ludlow Massacre, where they burned up all the tents on Easter morning. Goons out of the jail put coal oil on the tents and burned up the striking workers' families. And if Rockefeller had gone to Attica, those prisoners were about ready to give up. But he didn't go, and the result was that many guards were also killed. So I was in favor of picketing there. In fact, the women's outfit that I belonged to didn't want to picket the same day of the big demonstration in Albany. But I said, it's good, it's better to have all the demonstrations in one day. So I had a poster, I think, Rockefeller calls the shots at the Museum of Modern Art and at Attica. Because if he had gone to Attica, I think 47 deaths would have been avoided. He was afraid to go, probably.
Actually, those two visits to a museum were different, at least as far as I understand, than your viewing of the work of other people.
Why?
You've said that you don't look at the work of other artists.
Why?
That's what I wanted to ask you.
I never said that.
It's quoted in one of the pieces.
No, when they ask me if I have influences, I don't copy anybody. I never did. Because I feel that the most important thing of art, and in art, I always tell students this, is to find your own road. Now, in the beginning, you may be influenced a little by this or that.
It's often been said that, and you have denied it, as I recall,
Yeah.
that you were influenced by the German Expressionists.
I may have been, but actually when I was very young, I never even saw the German Expressionists, but I liked them very much.
To the work of which artists do you most respond?
Well, I wouldn't be able to say out of the whole history of the human race, there's a lot of artists, you know. I like Rembrandt, I like Goya, I like Kirchner, I like Kokoschka. Oh, I like a lot of artists, but there's so many artists you couldn't narrow it down like that. You don't live in the world alone, but you see now, for instance, I know figurative painters that will take the formation of a figurative painting done maybe 50, 100 years ago, and then they'll fit modern figures into that. I never do anything like that because I think the mood of today, the history of today, has its own rhythm. And the people you see today, you should paint the way they are now, you know.
Is geometry very important
Very.
for painting?
And I was very good in mathematics in school.
Can you talk about that?
Well, I just, more than just the portraits of people, the whole composition is to me very exciting. In fact, one of the most exciting things I do is divide up a canvas, you know, either a still life, a street scene, or a person painting. So that it's not just the image of the person, but it's the whole canvas that participates in it.
Do you identify with your subjects?
Yes, completely. Sometimes I get it's empathy almost. I get so identified that when they leave, you know, I feel like an untenanted apartment.
How often and how long do they sit for their portraits?
Well,
What's the process?
now I make the mistake. I made the mistake recently of having people sit too long, but that was Henry Hope when he was going to Europe, and I had to. But actually, 2.5.
What do you mean sit too long? For how long did they sit?
Well, they sat about 4 or 5 hours, and that's too long for me, for my back. I can't sit up
for
that
you
long.
rather than...
Yeah, for me physically. Also, you do the best work in the first, I do the best work in the first 2 or 3 hours. Now, I can have up to 5, 6 poses, but they're not usually. The first pose could be 2.5 hours, but after that, they're 2 hours apiece. But I work very hard, very concentrated.
Is this a good time to be an artist?
Well, right now, for me, art is getting very fragmentary.
Is it art or aesthetics?
Aesthetics and art are all one in a way, aren't they? Or are they? No, they aren't. The whole big aesthetic that includes everything isn't getting fragmentary, but the art of today is getting rather fragmentary.
And how do you see it rearranging itself or reemerging?
I don't. I can't predict. You see, I don't know if we're going to have, if we're going to be destroyed by a neutron bomb. I think Carter's twisting Brezhnev's tail, but I don't know whether that will provoke an atomic war, but that would be the most frightful thing that could happen. In fact, I am not all that pro-Russian. It's just that I'm pro-detente because I don't want to see the world destroyed. And I think every sensible person should be that, pro-detente.
If you had it to do over again, what would you do otherwise?
Nothing.
Nothing?
No. What can you do otherwise? To begin with, it's after the fact. I think one reason, you see, I rushed in. I didn't think enough about, you see, many people are very unconventional. I know a girl who is, what is it when you just sleep with everybody? What do they call you? You know. I forget what it is. There's a word. Not a whore. No, she didn't do it for money. Is she?
The suggested word was promiscuous.
Promiscuous, utterly promiscuous. But then she became completely respectable, and no one would ever have known that that era existed. But I never did any of that because I had no time for pretense because I was always too busy painting.
What's your most prized possession?
What?
Your most prized possession.
Oh, I don't know. What is yours?
I guess my own views.
Your own
that
self.
Yes.
Well, life itself, that is your most prized possession, and I'm getting close to the end. So sometimes I get afraid of dying a bit.
Well, thank you, Alice Neel, for enhancing our lives with your work and your conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My goodness, it went all that time. Well, you're so nice. It seemed like nothing.
Nice. And what I'd like to do is to ask the class now, if you have any questions, won't you please raise your hand, and I will call on you. And if you choose to, you may identify yourself by name as well.
Listen, tell me first, was
Yes.
I all right?
You were wonderful. You were better than all right. I told you.
Thank you.
Do you have a question?
Slips handed out when she came in this evening. Would you please leave them here? Once
You'll have to repeat it.
I will repeat the question, yes.
I would like to ask you to comment, if you will, on the contribution you feel the WPA art program made to the development of art in America. I was shocked by what you said about
What? Yeah.
what happened to some
Yeah,
of
that was frightful.
Canvases.
I mean, I know it kept artists alive. That was the contribution.
Look here, all the first line runners, Jackson Pollock would have died of hunger, so would Franz Klein. All of them were on the WPA. Everybody was on the WPA. But I tell you what, last year, did you know that there were 2 WPA shows? One at the Parsons Gallery. Now, if you see, if it was just my slide lecture, I'd show all this.
The other
You ought
one
to
at
have a
the Gray
slide
Gallery.
lecture sometime. The other at the Gray Gallery. And I had 2 pictures in each. And in fact, Hilton Kramer, that usually doesn't like me, gave me good reviews for those. He said, at least I just didn't keep in line, you know. Now, he put down the WPA, which is wrong. You cannot cross out how many years? It was from 33 to the war.